Hi, I'm Sam Fessich from the EduMagic podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
You are listening to the High Tech Podcast, and this is one of the hosts of the High Tech Podcast. You're joined with myself, Josh Schwartz, and my co-host,
me, William Illingworth, the guy in purple. If you're watching, at least.
The guy, also known as the Networking Ninja. You thought I forgot, but I did not. We finally have a nickname for Will Illingworth. The Networking Ninja is his nickname. Now, that's not why we're here. We'll talk about that more, but that was an ISTE thing. So if any of you met us at ISTE and were involved in that nicknaming, thank you.
Pretty sure we have to thank Christy for that? Or was
that was Christy,
and Arlen? Right? Well, we were spending that time. We had that moment with Christy and Arlen. She's just like, wow, Will, you're just like a networking ninja.
That might have been what it was.
I like that.
I remember that. So Christy and Arlen, thank you. If you listen to the podcast, thank you for the networking ninja. Anyway, networking ninja and my simple, walking samurai. I don't know. It's gonna come, like Sammy Samurai. I don't know. I got nothing. And whatever. This week on the High Tech Podcast, we are joined by another guest. I know you guys are like, well, how many guests are you gonna have? A lot.
As many as we can.
Because we've hit the point where it's boring just to listen to us. Anyway, this week we are joined by Laura. She's going to be talking to us about SEL, also known as
socio-emotional learning.
Yeah, I was going to say sandwich European lettuce.
Okay.
Yeah. Socio-emotional learning.
That's that moment when you're like talking to a banker or something on your phone. You're like, oh, could you, what's your address? Like, oh, that's like W as in William, A as in asphalt, L as in, this is too hard.
Yeah, I just lost it. Anyway, SEL, socio-emotional learning. I got it right? I nailed it?
You got it.
Okay, perfect. This is a topic that's been on our list for a little while, added clearly by Will and not by me. Because it's a popular topic that's popped up, I think, before COVID, but as you were mentioning in the episode with Laura, definitely much more popular now post-COVID. There were a bunch of conversations about our humanity and the way we engage emotions with our students and things like that. Laura's got excellent perspective on SEL in the classroom, how she's implemented it, what she does, I think is very helpful. And it was a great conversation that we got to jump into. So I'm not going to waste any more of our time with this ridiculous intro. And I'm just going to jump in with Laura. So let's jump in with Laura and hear more about SEL in the classroom and its benefits.
All right, folks, we are here with our SEL expert. I hope I haven't oversold you, but we're very excited to have you with us on this episode, Laura. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the High Tech Podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited for our conversation this evening about an area I'm very passionate about.
Oh, I can't wait to hear exactly how it's come together for you. I mean, let's start there. How long have you been an educator? What started you on the SEL track? Hey, listener, we're going to use SEL a lot, I think, but socio-emotional learning, right? That's what we're trying to get at. So what's the background?
Yeah, so this will be my 10th year in education in August. Oh, wow. I am a middle school Spanish teacher in Tennessee. Went to Marshall University and University of Tennessee for graduate school. Worked in an urban setting with Teach for America in high school. Okay. And then now I'm currently obviously in the middle school. And what really got me into SEL, probably on the forefront of my mind and kind of changed my entire philosophy about teaching, probably started with COVID and just seeing the dire need to serve my students more than just the content. And so that really forced me to take a look at my practice and dive into resources, watch YouTube videos, check out books, look at some research about it, what it really is, what does that look like for myself and other educators and my colleagues during this difficult time, and then how can I best serve the needs of all my students and looking kind of at the whole child rather, again, than being just so driven by the content and not really caring about their whole being.
Wow. And so if you did that if I count that right in COVID years, that's about 6 years ago you started.
Yes.
It's amazing. I mean, that's the hardest time to try and pivot into this, but you've now brought it into all of your practice. Are you still involved in any sort of online or distance teaching, or was that just a COVID time and your district's back to falling class?
Yeah, so we did hybrid and then all in person. We never really truly closed, but the past 2 years, if that's correct, I've been just in person.
Okay. That's really awesome. And when you have the idea of SEL, right, we're trying to get to the whole being, the human being. Are you dealing with students who are kind of, I hate to say homogenous, or do you have like special education students in your classes as well as, maybe honors and others, or is it one set of group?
I have 2 set of honors classes, and those are for high school credit. And then the rest of my classes, since I serve students in 5th or 8th grade, special education students, gifted and talented, ELLs, all
Wow.
of the things. So they're all in the classroom for the lower grades. So I'm serving, a wide variety of their intellectual abilities.
Wow. That's awesome. I'm curious. So you said COVID was kind of the thing that prompted you started reading more about it. Looking at what you're doing with SEL, what are some of the specific practices you've been pulling in, both in, maybe talk a little bit about what you did at first when you were in COVID, but now what does it kind of look like, kind of comparing those two?
Yeah, great question. So when I had to pivot literally overnight, and what I found that, building the relationships with students is so imperative. And I think I really found that out teaching middle school. So the first thing I started was a check-in with Google Forms, and I still do that. And what I do is it has their name on it because it's, importing the data from Google Form. And then they have the emoji check-in with me. And so I really like that with middle school because I want to create a safe space for students to articulate how they're feeling. But, not every student wants to say, hello, I am feeling sad today because XYZ, or I am frustrated. I don't even like doing that as adults. So they just click the emoji that they are. And then there's also a space where they can type anything. It just says, tell me anything else that you would like to share. And sometimes they say NA, or I'm hungry, or this test is going to be so hard. But again, creating that safe space. And then immediately I can, just filter out like, okay, 10 of them are very happy. It's Friday. 5 of them are stressed. 2 are tired. 1 is angry. And that just gives me a quick heartbeat of like, this is the, general check of my 8th grade class right now, my 7th grade class. And so that's always the forefront of what we do. And I think by creating that form, I hope my vision was that they would know that I care about them and how they're doing before I'm starting, this is the homework, this is the objective of the day, just grind.
The tactical stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this is also very popular, I'm sure, but with going to COVID and not seeing them face to face, I wanted to do a morning greeting. And so a lot of them would not always turn on their camera. And so I just had to be vulnerable with myself. And we would do a little dance party and have a brain break. And then I kind of had to reimagine what that looked like in the classroom. So we just do the morning greeting at the door. And again, that's just another checkpoint where they can, offer a smile. Some give me a hug. Some just wave, and that's fine. I respect that. So it's just building relationships and checking in on them, what that looks like virtually or in the class.
And I am so far from elementary school and ages and younger students. Like, are we talking 10 to 13?
Yep,
8 to 13?
exactly.
Okay.
10 to about 13 or 14.
And so you're giving them kind of maybe the first space where they're getting to self-report, like, okay, how am I feeling? You're starting that introspection, but also trying to create the safe space to say like, hey, I care, I'm here. Has any of those, it's probably easy when the smileys just, okay, keep moving, keep happy, but have any of those sad faces turned into larger conversations or better engagement?
Yes, exactly. So what I found out was, which is very sad at times, I think middle school students, what I was seeing from the data, and this is just directly collected from these responses, frustrated, annoyed, tired, And then some will say, this is going on at home, or I have a lot of homework, or I didn't sleep good. And then that's when I can have that one-on-one conversation with them. And it's very privately, I'm not calling them out like, hey, Will, you had a bad day. What can I do? I try to form that relationship and just to check on them. And some want to keep talking. Another reason why I really think SEL is important is I can do what I can in the classroom, but a lot of times I feel that I can also provide maybe another resource to the child or the family, like if they need to go talk to the counselor, or maybe they need to go get a drink of water, or maybe they don't need to work with this individual today because they had a little, tiff outside in the hallway. So it's just kind of learning about all those other things that middle schoolers really care about, the peer-to-peer acceptance and who they're becoming as an individual. So I think that's why it's just important to create that space so they can tell you if they want to, and that's their choice always.
I love just this first idea though. It's so practical. Like you're just doing one form and you're getting these insights, it's not like you had to change your entire classroom, put different stuff up on the, you could have done certain things, right? But a Google form is a good first practice here.
Yeah, well, and I like you're grabbing the temperature of the students a little bit, if not literal temperature, folks who are listening, but the emotional temperature and kind of the feel for the students, getting to know. I think what's really interesting about what you commented there is this isn't necessarily any big crazy stuff you're doing, but you're able to identify the student's not having a great day. I know they don't get along with this student. Maybe it's not the best idea to put them together because that's going to get in the way of their learning at the end of the day. And it's not something they probably appreciate. So as adults, we're able to mostly avoid people, maybe not, that we don't want to talk to. But there's a helpfulness to that where you're able to kind of see where some things might pop in and get in the way of the learning that's getting in there. Now, Will and I are thinking through where we look at this information, and we realized we never really asked at the beginning for you to talk about, for those who don't really know much beyond what we just talked about with SEL, kind of a formal definition. How do you describe it to people when you're trying to explain what this looks like beyond just some of these practices we've talked about, but kind of I call it the elevator pitch, the little kind of what is this to that person? How do you describe SEL that way?
Yeah, for me, it's just being able or starting to develop a sense of I can express how I'm feeling to somebody, and it's okay that I'm feeling this way, and here's some resources that can equip me to carry on my day. And then I'm, what you were saying earlier, Will, internalizing I'm not feeling good right now, and maybe this is why, and it's probably impacting my learning, but my teacher has provided some resources for me, and I can just either verbalize or write it in a note, and just developing those practices. It's okay to feel the way that you do, but we've got to try to cope with it as much as we can in a positive way that we can keep on learning and attaining success but just recognizing these are my emotions, how to deal with them as best as I can, and reaching out and just developing. I also think the relationship building with the peers as well, how to get along with one another and just all the pieces on that. That's a different episode if you ever have me back. So
absolutely,
one that even adults could maybe listen to.
I concur.
Well, and the irony, right, is SEL is I know at least in the last 5 years, it's been a pretty big buzzword. I was hearing it before COVID, but COVID brought it to the forefront because we were so disembodied. We were so separate from our students, from each other. And so we needed to do tactical, practical things to get back to that. But education wasn't, for quite some time, education, especially out of the early 2000s, was very test focused. Let's get these students to the knowledge information. We kind of stepped away from the holistic human. As you're saying some of those practices, I was like, oh, so you're their first counselor. I don't say that in any bad way, but those students are getting some of those practices, some of those encouragements from you as their teacher that I've experienced with counseling. I've had a couple of different therapists in my life, and those are those things that if you don't have someone who encourages you to do it, you're modeling those good behaviors, those opportunities, they're not going to learn that. And they become those adults that we're joking about, right? Who don't know how to play well with others. This is a great first example in the classroom. They have a safe space to do that.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this, but we also have a therapy dog in every one of our schools. And so once a week, I reserve it on a Google Calendar. And that to me is also SEL, because I have seen a lot of kids that would just really do well when they're like constantly petting the dog. And I don't know all the research, I don't want to be quoted, but just, I think that, again, creating that safe space that they're not going to want to pet me, but I think maybe they're channeling some hard times, or maybe it's just really good for their endorphins. But the dog really enhances the environment too for the classroom. And then they bring them treats, and we work, it's kind of an incentive too. But I have noticed that has really helped a lot of students' behavior as well. And it just kind of brings the community of the class. They want to walk her to the next class, they want her to come sit by them. And so I think she's part of the SEL as well, in my opinion.
This is the exact timing is not too relevant, but I'm in this room that we're in at the moment for about the 11th hour today. I stepped out for 1 hour to have my lunch. It was great, but we're dog sitting, and I'll tell you, I want to leave my office so much more frequently, because I'm like, I could just go pet dogs real quick, and then I come back up to this little box that I live in for my work and then podcasting. I'm an adult. I am a tax-paying citizen, and I want to go play with the dog for 5 minutes.
See?
It gives everybody just some space, and then I feel better. I'm ready to get back into my work. I'm ready to, it makes sense. It doesn't have to, the research is great when it proves it, but the experience is true too.
Plus, I would like somebody to try to fight me to say a dog is not a good help for students. If you are, I don't want to talk to you as a person. I'm sorry, people. Come on. Of course a dog helps. I'm curious. Do you have any kind of highlight or stories of where you did this with certain students and there was just kind of an aha moment, or something that was just kind of this was awesome. This really either impacted the student, or you're just we all have those occasional moments where we're hey, it's working. Do you have any of those moments?
Yeah, I feel like I've had a couple epiphanies, and maybe the student as well. I try to do a lot of pair work and group work and station work, and I was reading one of the Google Forms one time, and a student said that they didn't want to work with this person. And so I thought, oh goodness, they might have worked by them, because I just randomly put all these students together in centers. And so then I was able to pull the student aside after the other student had exited the classroom and just kind of talk through some things. And I think that allowed me to see something that I was just so I didn't know what was going on. And then I'm just glad that they provided that to me, because that really, like you're saying, if there's some issues in the classroom, that's just impacting their education, potentially other students, and then, might have to stop teaching because I'm trying to deal with that and navigate that. So I think they realized, and it wasn't early on, this isn't the first week of school, after we're doing all these exercises, and me being vulnerable too, to express when I'm not having a good day, I try to work through it with them. And they just said this isn't the best partner for me. But I thought it was really wise, because when I was 10, I would have been I'm not working with him or her, but they said it in a way that was still respectful. Talking to me as their educator, and this is why, and not real defensive. And I just thought that is just so insightful. And I said, we're going to work through it. But I just respected that person advocated for themselves in a way that seemed very appropriate. And I just would have never known that. And then what if I would have put those two together? That could have been a very time ticking bomb. And and I think a lot of teachers, they don't mean to do stuff like that, but they're just hustle bustle. And then, they sit this person, and they could have went the whole entire year sitting by someone, or having to work, and I think that could be difficult at times. But we want them to have grit, of course. So I said, we've got to try to get along with one another. But for today, I'm going to empathize with you.
Right. Yeah. I love that too. Just saying there's a balance in the SEL practice, right? It's I can imagine some people who might respond to SEL as like, we can't coddle the kids, right? Or let's just put, pillows and marshmallows around them kind of attitude. I'm like, there are days where I walk off we're human. Emotions are real, and it's worth addressing that. But I like that you're saying today is empathy. You have your space. Let's think through, and maybe even giving them that prep time. Like, we're going to think through strategies to work on the grit side of things. Like, sometimes we do just have to work with people we don't like. I had a long, probably 6-month process with a former coworker that was that for me.
Yeah, see, and I want them to be prepared for high school and college and, work environments. And I tell them sometimes, I said, this is hard in the real world, but I said, I want you to have opportunity to maybe work with someone of different, communication styles. And then I started going, I could tell they're getting glazed over. And I was like, they talk different than you, and they express themselves, and they're like, oh, I got you. And I can see the little light bulbs. I can see some of the grins, and it's all work in progress. But I try to model that too. Like when someone comes into my classroom, I try not to be upset, or if they're calling the phone and then the emails going, I just try to also show that mutual respect, because I want them to see that, because you can't be throwing all these SEL practices if you are not also walking the walk. And so I think that's important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. I was just a thought running through my head as you were talking through things, because I agree with Will. I think I've seen it, right? There's a lot of people who would push back against, or not a lot, but there's maybe a lot. I don't know. I didn't do a count. Let's just say 7. So 7 people will push back against this for the reasons he's talking about. But I remember, so a lot of my experience now is working in higher ed, and with Will and I work more with older and adult level learning. But I worked with kids for a lot, especially teenagers, for quite a while. And I remember in those moments, I think what you're describing is like, yes, okay, we want them to be able to get along with people. We want them to grow. We want them to be able to succeed. But also in those moments where you're listening to the student, you're having some empathy in that moment about a situation to them that probably maybe seems small to us, but seems huge to them. You're building relationships with those students in a way that gives you a better ability to speak into their life later, and that gives you a better ability to teach them. And gives you more of that rapport that I think too often we forget as people educating or working with kids. We jump to kind of well, you should do this so you can, be better for whatever's going to happen 20 years from now, not remembering this kid's experiencing this right now. And if I take a moment to slow down and just experience it with them, listen to them, care about them, it's going to pay off way better at the end of this course, and will probably get me closer to what the people pushing back want me to get to than if I just held some magic hard pull up your bootstraps line right now and took some time to slow down.
Yeah, I feel that all of the time that we invest in it, and it's part of our daily routine, I'm getting all that time back, because I'm, knock on wood, I'm rarely sending kids to the office or being disrespected. They might not love the class or me, but I'm not having a lot of confrontation, where I feel I've seen other educators, just level them up. And I really think you just got to seek first to understand, then be understood. They want to, I am right. But I think, you're 10 years old. You don't have all this capacity and wisdom in life things. Give them a break sometimes. So I do think, yeah, you're right. You can't expect them to be like where we are. We've had so many more life experiences. So you just chill out. I think, but that's part of the SEL is I'm not going to get upset, even if they're coming upset at me. I don't have to, I just keep my same tone. I sit down with them. I don't like to talk down, even though I'm very short and little, because I just feel like that's belittling. I don't want my boss to talk to me in that way, because I'm, you kind of feel threatened. Yeah. So just those nonverbal things too, I feel a lot of educators, do that really well, but some could work and refine on their practice and just to build that community.
I love that. I've got a, hey listener, fourth wall, we always have some questions prepared, and one of them was hey, what are your top SEL practices? I think we're getting through those. The Google form one's a great example. These things the dog and how you approach the students, how you talk to them, these are all practical examples. Folks, if you want to do SEL, pick one of these things that Laura suggested, start doing them tomorrow. You don't have to do one at a time. I'm curious though, before we get towards kind of a tool or a solution we might bring into SEL, is there anything that you do now? I'm penning myself in with this question. Sorry. Is there anything that you do that's related to your assessments when it comes to SEL? Have you changed your tests? Have you changed the way that these students have to respond to you, to get a grade at the end of the day as an SEL practice?
Yeah, so with, I guess, a lot of, because most of my stuff is online, I will always like have a little reflection, like, how well did you like this test? What was the easiest question? Is there anything else you want to tell me? And they are so honest. But again, providing that feedback, and that's really important for me to be able to take that feedback. And a lot of them, again, it's more about assessment, like question 5 was so hard, or you didn't go over that, and so I tried, again, that's more for the content exact questions, but I think it's just accepting the feedback and then taking the feedback and doing something with it. So, and sometimes it's brutal, but I'm proud that they say that, because I can only get better if I don't know. And so, and some will not say anything. I also, and I don't always do this, but with Microsoft Flip, because it's a video, it's kind of like instant messaging with students and Snapchat, but educational. I would do a lot of grids with that. And we would do like a daily check-in, and they would, get on the camera, or they can just do the microphone and, say like, this is going really well for me. And I would just do the hide. So it would just be between me and them. Like not everybody, not all stakeholders were seeing the video. A lot of kids thrived on that. Probably the more extroverts one, if I'm being honest, they've got popping videos and like their cats jumping out, and they got like, unicorns flying, super creative. Other students, that's, just not really, I don't know, probably as comfortable, but they still participate. So I always wanted to create, a little grid for that. And we do fun. We did like a cooking show. We do some fun ones too, just to like, try to get them excited to see themselves on video.
I love that. I appreciate that insight, because one of those things that I was seeing as a trend in the SEL practices you're suggesting were like behavioral and how to respond to students, how to engage them more effectively, all good things. But I think SEL is important at the assessment level. Like if we're saying we want to respect these humans, assessments very often are machine-ish, mechanistic. I don't know. Like it's just like input things and be done, and I think that if we can give them voice in the assessment too, that's a great opportunity. So I'm glad to hear that option you suggested.
Yeah,
we are. Go ahead, Laura. You're good.
This is, I don't know if this is SEL, but I use all of like their names and questions on the warm-ups and tests, and that really gets them excited. And I thought that was a super like fine, thing.
Easy.
Takes, but it's like when they see their name, they're like, oh, Josh, number 5, that's me. And, I wink at them. I'm like, yeah, that's you. Or I put their little picture of their dog on the test. I'll have their parents send me that. So it's just, I think that's more relationship building, but it goes all together, that I care enough to put all of their names. And, if I forget one of their names, they do let me know. So I know they're feedback. Yeah. Oh, I know they tell me. Anyway, go ahead.
No, you're good. That was, I think that's really cool. Just even the small stuff. I don't think we have to draw lines whether it's SEL or not. I think it's at the end of the day, SEL is we're talking about it. And to be upfront, like SEL is not an area I knew a lot about before. It was a topic that Will probably dropped in. And I was like, that seems like something cool we should talk about. What is that again? And then we talked about it a little bit. So I was not as familiar with it. And as I'm listening to you talk about it, at the end of the day, it is about the fact that like we reference, and I think in my higher ed context a lot, treating students like their brains on a stick. Is the joke. And it's
not a
realizing, not a good thing. That was not a positive. Realizing that that's not the reality, right? Like they're human beings, emotions play a factor into learning, and it's not coddling to understand them. It's not even that small stuff, making sure their names are there or finding out pictures of their dogs or things. It shows that we're not just there to impart some magic knowledge to them, but we're there to actually care about them as a person and grow as a person. And I think that's helpful. That's powerful and can be a very, very useful thing. Now, Laura, I'm curious. This is the part that the high tech podcast always has to get into because Will and I started this because nobody was telling us tools, and we loved tools. So I'm curious. You've mentioned a couple tools. You mentioned Flip. You mentioned Google Forms. This can be one of those, or it could be a different one. Is there kind of like a big tool that you're like, this has been super helpful for me doing SEL that I'd recommend to somebody else to look at when they're using it?
Yeah, so I would say for me, Quizizz or Quizizz, however you want to pronounce that, they have a ton of like pre-made templates of SEL. I call it a daily check-in, and my students bookmark this. And it's kind of similar to the Google form, but the Google form has the warm-up questions anyway. And so the check-in, there's usually like some memes on there, how they're feeling. They can provide an audio if they want to tell me anything. There's a written response. There's also like very elementary things, like some smiley face things, like, really kiddie, I thought, for my students. And then some like, I'm feeling sad today because why, or I'm happy, or this makes me stressed. So for me, Quizizz, they have all these templates, and then they go at their own pace. And so it's an individual assessment. So they might take 5 minutes to complete it. They might take 30 seconds. And then I'm getting all of that data too. And then you can import your own questions, if you don't like the wording, or you can use, again, all free, of course. And I try to integrate that with 5th through 8th grade. And again, some of the questions, might be a little bit more suited for upper level, I guess, versus middle school. But, you fill it out, your students, obviously. So that one I recommend. I already talked about Flip, Google Form. I use a Mentimeter sometimes, and that's just collecting live data from your participants. And I'll just do, on Mondays, I do, how was your weekend? And then they just pop up to a word cloud, fun, boring, soccer, whatever. And then on Friday, I'll just say, like, what did we learn this week? And then that's where they rate me. And then so I'll see a little pie chart, and that's just really another temperature check. But I like the live participant data, and I like for them to see everyone's responses. And then, sometimes they'll say, if they see something that, sparks their interest, they'll say, who, went to see this movie or whatever. So that's just like a fun little tool I've used.
Those Mentimeters, you're saying you'll do like Monday and Friday, so you're bookending your weekend or your week, so you're keeping that consistently. Is the Quizizz something? Was that a daily? What's the check in there? Daily?
Yeah, that's daily check in, and that's a little bit longer, I guess, than just one word answer. Yeah. Now some students do. Again, you get one word answers, and then you get this beautiful, eloquent paragraph.
A novel. If Will wrote something and there's half of it's Latin and it's great.
Yes.
Is that something where, like, I'm just thinking functionally, do you have to like reset it? Do you have to make new quizzes every day? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, and I probably need to refine this. I know that the kids bookmark the joinmyquiz.com, but the code changes every day. Now, the questions do not, because I personally could not. I need to work smarter, not harder with that, because I have too many other things. So they're familiar with what the questions are going to be asked. Now, their answers obviously vary, but I know they go there every day, but the code, is different.
Okay. So you can keep functionally, just for I'm thinking for teachers who are considering this, administratively, you make one and you can just keep them in the practice of going to the same thing. You just pop up or you write on the whiteboard or whatever you do, you put up the code for them.
Yep.
Like a Nearpod, like a Pear Deck, things where you even by Mentimeter, you need something to join in the session.
That's right. Exactly.
That sounds really easy. It doesn't sound too hard to make it and then just keep using it. I was thinking for a second, I was like, wait, she's doing this every day? She makes a new quiz?
No, I did do that, and that was just 5 preps. I had these cute little images, and then no, this is not functional. But then, you kind of work out your practice. You're like, how much time do I have allotted? What can I do? What do I think works? And also, again, teaching middle school, I don't want this long questionnaire. If they want to type long, I'll respect that, but it can't be too long, or then they probably will feel like it's an assessment. So 3 to 5 questions max.
Okay,
that's great.
That's great.
And I'm thinking too, as we transverse our audience, we bring in K-12 folks. We started things in higher ed. We are higher ed-ish, but I left higher ed. I'm in corporate. We just kind of education. But if you think of the impact to professors, a lot of professors are jealously guard their 55 minutes or their 60 minutes, or not. Every teacher does, but I have had a lot of faculty push back on tasks like this that would take time. And I think like your point there being like, if students get in the routine, and if you control how many questions you have, somebody might give you a paragraph, but even if somebody's just giving you a word or two or a quick sentence, a couple of responses, I doubt it's taking you 10 minutes of your class time.
No,
5 minutes?
Five top.
5 top.
Yeah.
I think any teacher could address that for checking in with their students, learning more about them, bringing that social emotional experience into the classroom. I don't think that that's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah, and this might be not well received, but I really believe that kids work hard for teachers they like. And I don't know, I don't work in the corporate world, but to me, and that's even true with my personal administrator, like we have a healthy relationship. So I will do whatever I go above and beyond because the relationship's there.
Yeah.
And so I feel like an
Yeah.
opposite maybe, but I won't, be negative with that. So I think, it's 5 minutes. It could be 3 minutes. And, with your classroom management, you just have it tight. So you have the code already projected or it's already on your learning management system. So I'm not sitting up there going, today we're going to check in. You're going to go to join my quiz. I do that the first day. And then the routine is so they already bookmark it. So, I mean, it's probably 3 minutes. And again, I would lose, to me, all of the relationship building if I never checked on them. That's how I feel. And I think that's true for adults. So you got to be open-minded.
Frankly, I'm pretty sure the only reason Josh gets me to do anything is because I like him. So I mean, he's got tons of tasks.
Thanks, buddy.
That's right.
I set the task, so I don't need to like Will, so it's fine. But no, just checking. No, I think there's if I could jump off of something you said and just stick to it and really hammer it home with the people listening. There's something very true about that from K-12 to higher ed to corporate. Like, if you respect someone, I've seen it in my life with the people that I work with. I see it with the people that in different environments and teachers I've had. I've always worked harder for the people that I respect. And they could ask things of me that normal people I would probably get a little bit, what the heck are you doing? Because there's a relationship there. And I know that they care. And so when they ask something, I know they're not just trying to take advantage or they're trying to do what they're doing. They actually have a good reason for it or a thing in there. And I had plenty of teachers like that. Teachers who clearly they did not care to give good feedback or get to know my life circumstances. And so I didn't really care to get to know their circumstances or work hard in their classes. And then there were topics that like I had zero interest in college and high school that like, because the teacher cared so much, I like learned a whole bunch of stuff about that simply because I really liked them and I wanted to engage with whatever the heck they were giving. And so there's a lot to what you're saying there, Laura. I think that's a big thing that we as teachers need to remember when we're engaging with our students. That matters. That relational capital matters.
Yeah. This has been just awesome. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
We've run through the door of SEL. We've only ever mentioned it briefly on the podcast.
Yay.
So we just brought everybody up to speed. But we'd absolutely love to have you back because I think we've probably only touched a little bit, right? There's so much more in this world. Is there any sort of like last encouragement? It's just in the sense of SEL. Like, is there an encouragement you'd like to leave teachers with? Like, give it a shot, or it's not too hard, or anything like that?
Yeah. I would say just try one ed tech tool, whether that's that Google form or a brain break with Go Noodle video or Mentimeter or whatever works for you, or Kahoot, if you're comfortable with that. And just start it from day one. To me, like, build it into your routine, get excited and passionate because that's infectious to students, whether they're 5 years old or 55. And so jump in with it, and if it reflect on it, if that tool's not working, then the next day kids are resilient. That's the beautiful thing about students. I feel that try something new because that might cater to your audience better and to you. So I just feel like some tools have worked really well, and just like don't give up on it and just like get your feet wet because you're never gonna know. And I would guarantee almost like you're gonna have some positive rapport and like it's going to benefit your students.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Josh and I are going to wrap up the episode here in just a second. We really enjoyed our time with you today, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You guys are awesome. I love your energy too. You're so laid back.
You you get to see this side of things. Well, that was just awesome. Thank you,
Yes.
Laura, for taking the time with us. Thank you for opening our eyes to some of the practices. I understand. It's one of these terms, right? Like socio-emotional learning, right? So social, the interactions of others, emotions, how we feel, learning. Like how do we do these things together, right? It makes sense. And then you hear the things she's doing to reach her students, the things she's doing to make safe space for her students, the things she's doing to frankly elevate learning by getting the other stuff out of the way, or not even getting out of the way. Excuse me. I don't think that's right. Putting it back in the right place, right? Reminding ourselves, reflecting on the fact that human learning is important. We are not machines. We're not just going to like take it in and restore it like a memory, a hard drive or something, right?
Maybe not you, but I'm basically the Terminator.
When you can give me your strategies, man, you let me know.
I got it. Yeah. Clearly, if I was a robot, I would look like this. Like that's what I chose as a robot. No, I think the point that you're making is it's interesting. Like it's this big term, but I think this is a clear place where in education we've given this fancy term to something that's really just more simple, which is like caring for students and how they feel.
Wait, what?
Like,
if anybody knows me at any level, has ever seen any of our tweets that don't just have our like episode GIF in it, you've probably seen that I love Ted Lasso. And there's a character in Ted Lasso, Roy Kent, who's played by the wonderful, the amazing, the lovely Brett Goldstein. Brett Goldstein has a podcast, Films to be Buried With. You should go check that out. Brett, if you ever heard this and you wanted to have us on your podcast, I'd love to talk about.
He's probably a regular listener. I feel like this is probably his jam.
This is his niche right here.
Like between Ted Lasso episodes, he's like, Ed Tech, woohoo! But like
what Josh up to?
But like a British voice, that's
a dark, gravelly British voice.
Yeah.
No. He says in every single one of his episodes, I think at the end of it, he's like something to the effect of, and blah blah blah, and be excellent to one another. I'm just like, that is the principle behind SEL. You are taking that approach to saying to your students, let's be excellent to one another, because you're modeling, you, the teacher, the adult, the person, the model, are saying to your students, the kid, the young adult, this is the way to be. This is how we should treat one another. And so it's in many ways, we look at instruction, we look at instructional models, right? And we say like, okay, what is Laura going to do to teach? Sure, that's important. But like what Laura was demonstrating is she's reaching the students. And at the end of it, like that story with the two kids who aren't necessarily getting along, showing them how to better relate to one another. So it's not just like, hey, here's a thing you're going to do and it's going to improve test scores. No, this is a thing you're going to do that's going to change your classroom. The environment, the atmosphere of learning is going to be improved by you and by your students. They will become better participants in the learning by, frankly, being better people to one another. And we're talking about kids, right? We are now maybe in many cases teaching them the first time of being kind to one another, how to do that, how to model good relationships.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah, and I want to highlight too, like while Laura's experience comes from K-12, working with middle schoolers, she talked a bit about high schoolers. We did reference a lot of the fact that this has a place in higher ed, in corporate. Like we've talked a bit about corporate learning and things like that, and that space that's happening. This idea of caring about students' emotions, taking time to see where they're at, how they're feeling, matters, because whether you realize it or not, your students' feelings are affecting the learning experience in your classroom, in an online space, whatever it is. And so as a teacher, if that is affecting their learning, we need to care about that, right? Yeah. And like I think you commented on the fact that there are those out there that would push against this, that would probably see this as kind of coddling students. I think you referenced when we were talking to Laura marshmallows and pillows and things like, why don't we just put all the students over on those areas? And that's absolutely true. And there may be some of you listening to High Tech Podcasts that have those feelings, and I hear you. And because I care about social emotional learning, I care to listen to those feelings. But then I would push back.
I'm so proud of you.
I would push back to say the reality is these are not, especially in high school, middle school, and even college age. Now, in corporate level, when we're dealing with adults, there might be a little bit of a different way that we deal with this, it's not the same across all ages, what you're doing. But in the college level, especially, and the high school, middle school levels that we've been referencing, in many cases, we're dealing with people who are not where you are as a teacher. You know what I mean? Like, you may be in your 30s or 40s, or older in that age group. You've been through a lot. You've experienced a lot. You've seen a lot. You're a different person than you were 10 years ago. You're a different person than you were in your 20s. You're definitely a different person than you were in high school. Hopefully, if you're not, but if you're, so we can't. I still come to this perspective, and it was interesting. I was drawing these conclusions between my experience working with teenagers. We cannot expect them to be who we are now. That's unrealistic. And I see it all the time from professors that talk about their students, and I do too. Like, we all gripe about our students, but I see who talk about their students being like, well, they don't know this about the topic, or can you believe they wrote this? And it's like, well, yeah, they just entered your class. That's the whole point. You're there. So we need to care.
It's your job to get them to the next step.
We need to care about that. And I know I'm probably kind of aggressive and probably a little sarcastic, but that's me. And I've had those moments, right, where I've been in those spaces. But that's why I think it's not this case of we're coddling students. We're acknowledging a reality. People feel things.
Yep.
And if we actually care about our students, we need to show them and take a pulse on what those are, because whether you like it or not, it's impacting how your students are learning your content, what they're doing. And so a better way is to know what's going on so that you can account for that, deal with it, address it maybe, depending on the issue, but also show that you care for your students, that you actually care about what they're feeling, and you don't just care that they're learning whatever you're talking about at that point in time.
Yeah. We clearly care about this more because, like, usually we just debrief a little bit of how this went with the person we're talking to, or like here we're taking it further. Like, Josh and I are thinking about this in live time. We're seeing the impact, of course, through Laura's example to her students, but I'm acknowledging and thinking through like how some good teachers stood out for me. And we're practicing SEL practices even when I was their student, or how I could do it better moving forwards. Or I've got a couple examples in my head of when I shouldn't have done certain things, right? But it's a very important conversation to be had. So thank you, Laura, for opening this door for us on the podcast. We've not really gotten into this before. This has been an exciting conversation. We hope to have Laura back for this and more. And you, listener, if you care about SEL, if you care about what the human experience is in the learning process, follow us on Twitter, engage with us on YouTube, reach out to us, inbox at hightechpod.us. Come on the podcast. We'd love to hear how it works. And you know what? Here's my SEL empathetic invitation to someone who disagrees. Do you disagree? Do you feel like the academic experience needs to be more clinical? I'll put it that way. We need to be more on task, more focused, less about the personal experiences, helping students stop that at the door so they can be something else in the room. I've considered those thoughts in the past. I know that there's times where I've used that strategy myself. We'd be glad to have that conversation with you. So again, inbox at hightechpod.us if you want to take part in this conversation, because I think this is one that gets debated sometimes. Yeah. I know people who would push back on absolutely. This. So.
I always love a good debate. Come on, let's do it.
Hey. Gloves down. Empathetic approach first, right? Let's see how we can help each other. All right, folks. This has been episode 110. Holy smokes, Josh. Woo! We're pretty excited to have this behind us. We're looking ahead to episode 111. I love alliteration, and I love sequenced numbers. I don't know. I'm now in love with episode 111. 111, it makes me happy. I don't know what it is. it makes me all the more happy that we will be hosting for that episode Dr. Laura Cella. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation yet. Forgive me, Sharon. I hope you'll instruct us when we get to meet you. But we'll be having Dr. Batgirl. Frankly, that's her Twitter handle, and
super
she's
excited
my
about this.
favorite person in the world
Yes.
for that very reason. Coming to talk to us about her book, Fun, Impactful Learning, right? So we're going to be getting kind of further into this process of like SEL and the emotional experience, the human experience in the classroom. But we're looking forward to that next week on the High Tech Podcast, episode 111. As always, find us on Twitter and YouTube at High Tech Podcast. Email us at inbox at email us at inbox at hightechpod.us. Whew. Our website is hightechpod.us. Every single episode that we've ever released is on there with an episode page that Josh wonderfully curates and provides information to you about how to use the tools, get more information about our guests, etc., etc. Thank you again for joining us for another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology in the socio-emotional classroom, whether that's an online or face-to-face experience. See ya.
See ya.